You bring nothing but shame to this family. The words slammed into me like a freight train, louder than the murmurs around the long dining table. My father's voice echoed across the grand hall of our family estate, cutting through laughter and silverware clinks like a blade. His face was red, veins pressing against his temples, lips curled in disgust. And then he spat, right there on the marble floor. In front of 30 relatives, colleagues, neighbors, strangers, really all here for my younger sister's engagement celebration. All pretending to be perfect. Gasps followed. Some covered their mouths. A few averted their eyes. No one stood up for me. Not even my mother. She stood like a marble statue at the end of the table, eyes glassy, arms crossed tightly over her designer shawl. No sympathy. No words. No reaction. Her silence was worse than his rage. I felt the sting crawl up my throat, but I didn't cry. Not anymore. Not for them. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the glass of water beside me, mostly to stop them from shaking in the open. I glanced at my plate. Untouched. I wasn't hungry anymore. I told you not to show up, my father seethed. But you just had to drag your pitiful presence into this family's moment. Always making it about you. My sister, Ivy, smirked across the table, brushing a perfectly curled strand of hair behind her ear. She said nothing either. She didn't need to. Her eyes were gloating enough. You're not welcome here, my father growled, the final sentence spat like venom. You never were. The room was silent, watching me like I was some scene in a drama they didn't want to miss. I opened my mouth to speak when I heard the sound of a chair scraping across the wooden floor. It was Grandpa. Elias Alden, my father's father, slowly stood from the far corner, where he'd been sitting in silence all evening, eyes sunken beneath thick gray brows. Nobody noticed him much anymore. Just the old man, whose stories bored people and whose legacy was slowly being claimed by my father's arrogance. He said nothing at first. Instead, he placed a hand on the shoulder of his nurse and motioned her to step back. Then, from behind his chair, he pulled out a box. An old, weathered wooden one. Edges chipped, brass hinges tarnished with age, a leather strap holding it closed. Everyone's eyes followed it as he brought it forward and set it down right on the center of the long table. My father narrowed his eyes. What is this, Dad? What are you doing? Grandpa didn't look at him. He turned to me instead, his gaze steady, knowing. Sit down, sweetheart, he said softly to me. You'll want to be here for this. I sat slowly, heart pounding. Then, without another word, he unfastened the strap and opened the box. Inside were letters. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. A journal. Photos. Receipts. A necklace. Even a worn-out toy elephant I hadn't seen since I was 5. My mother took a shaky step forward. My father went pale. Maybe, Grandpa said, voice trembling but fierce. You should explain this. And that's when the whole room fell into stunned silence. My father didn't move. His jaw tightened as if the hinges had rusted shut. He looked at the box like it was some kind of trap, like the mere sight of its contents had pulled him into a war he'd long buried. His lips parted, but nothing came out. My mother looked like she might faint. Grandpa leaned on his cane, steadying himself before he spoke again. I kept everything. Every letter. Every card. Every drawing she made as a child. You said she was a disgrace. A burden. You told everyone she ran off, threw her life away, but you left out a few details, didn't you? I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I had no idea what was coming. My father's voice cracked through the silence. This is not the time. Then when Grandpa cut in, his voice rising, not loud, but sharp. Sharp enough to slice through pride and pretension. You humiliated your daughter in front of strangers. You spat on her, called her shameful. But tell me, Greg, what's more shameful, her honesty or your lies? Gasps rippled through the room. My father looked around, suddenly very aware of the audience. Ivy muttered under her breath, "This is ridiculous." Grandpa turned to her. "Stay seated, Ivy. You don't want to embarrass yourself further." I blinked, confused. What was in that box? Grandpa lifted the top letter with shaking hands and handed it to the woman seated closest to him, Mrs. Caldwell, our neighbor of 20 years. Read it, he said. Mrs. Caldwell adjusted her glasses and began softly. Dear Grandpa, I know you probably won't get this letter. I mailed it to your old house because I didn't know where else to send it. I just wanted to say I miss you. I wish you'd been at the art gallery. I sold 2 pieces. My first real sale. She paused, looking around. I never stopped thinking about our walks. About how you said my art made you feel like a boy again. I still paint, even when no one looks. Even when my own family says I'm wasting my life. She trailed off, voice cracking. People shifted uncomfortably. I never got a response to those letters, I whispered, stunned. Because your father took them from the mailbox, Grandpa said grimly. Every single one. My chest caved. I looked at my father. You what? He stood suddenly, slamming his fist on the table. Because I didn't want you feeding her delusions. She had talent, Grandpa snapped. She had nothing, he yelled. A dropout, a dreamer, living off tips and fumes. You think art puts food on the table? She refused to listen. I was trying to protect her. By erasing her? His silence was the answer. My fingers curled around the edge of my chair as something heavy sank into me. So all those years of feeling unseen, discarded, wasn't just my imagination. You burned the bridges before I could even walk across them, I whispered. Still, my voice shook less than his. Grandpa turned to the others. She wasn't the one who failed this family. She wasn't the shame. She was the only one brave enough to chase truth. Ivy rolled her eyes. Please. She lived in a shoebox apartment and worked at a coffee shop. If she's so brave, why is she still alone and broke? I looked right at her. Because I didn't want to marry for money like you. Dead silence. Aunt Valerie's wine glass clinked softly against her plate. Grandpa took out a photo and held it up. This was taken 2 years ago. That gallery she mentioned? It wasn't a small room, it was downtown Chicago. Her painting was purchased by a man who didn't even speak English, but he said her work felt like home. My eyes burned. I hadn't known he was there that night. She never stopped writing. Never stopped painting. Never stopped trying. That's more than I can say for half the people in this room. My father sat down like his knees had buckled. My mother still hadn't spoken a word. And then Grandpa said quietly, You owe her an apology, Greg. All of you do. The room turned to me. My father looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. But I didn't need to hear his apology. Not anymore. Because for the first time I saw it, the shift. The power wasn't theirs anymore. Not the people who ridiculed me. Not the ones who shunned me. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge. The truth was enough. Kindness, real kindness, was in the grace of rising when they wanted you on the floor. I stood up. Calm. Clear. I came here hoping maybe things had changed, I said. But it's okay. Because I changed. And with that, I walked out. But the story was far from over. Because 3 days later, a letter arrived at the estate with my name on the envelope, and what it revealed would leave the entire family reeling. 3 days passed. No calls. No texts. Not even a whisper from anyone in the family. Just silence, the kind that settles like fog after a storm. But I was used to it. Silence had been my companion for years, and this one, it didn't sting the same way. I poured myself a cup of coffee in my tiny apartment, cracked tiles, humming fridge, half-done canvases scattered across the floor, and stared out the rain-soaked window. That dinner replayed in my head, piece by piece. The venom in my father's voice. The frozen look in my mother's eyes. Ivy's smirk. And Grandpa, his trembling hand on that wooden box like it held the very soul of our fractured family. Then came the knock. A sharp, quick one. Not the kind that came from neighbors. I opened the door to find a courier standing in the hallway. Miss Alden, he asked. Yes. He handed me a thick envelope. No sender name. Just my name, written in familiar handwriting. My heart stalled. I need a signature, he said. I signed, closed the door, and stared at the envelope like it might detonate. I recognized the penmanship. Grandpa's. With shaking hands, I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter. No email, no legal forms, just ink on paper. My dearest Camila, if you're reading this, it means I've already put in motion what I should have done years ago. I watched them strip you of your voice. I watched them diminish your worth. And I said nothing for too long. But not anymore. This family forgot what legacy really means. Your father believed inheritance is built in boardrooms and bank vaults. But I remember when legacy was built in character, courage, and compassion. You, my girl, are all three. I've amended the will. Effective immediately, you are now the owner of the estate in Willow Ridge, the surrounding lands, and 60% of the shares in Alden Corp.
Yes. You read that right.
I bought them back quietly over the past 6 years, while your father bled them dry on ego and poor investments. I never told him. I didn't need to. I didn't do this for revenge. I did this because someone has to remember what this family once stood for, and you're the only one brave enough to rebuild it. I'll be gone soon. I can feel it. But I'm finally at peace knowing I'm leaving it in the right hands. With all the love they never gave you. Grandpa Elias. I covered my mouth as the letter slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. The estate, the company? 60%? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. The truth had just changed everything. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. The next morning, I walked into the Alden Court building. Security froze. Reception stared. People whispered. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor, my father's office. He wasn't expecting me. When the doors opened, I walked into a room that had once made me feel small. Not today. He looked up from his desk, startled. What are you doing here? I placed a copy of the legal transfer on his desk. Quiet.
Clean.
No emotion. He skimmed the document. His eyes widened. His hands began to tremble. No, he whispered. This isn't real.
It is.
60%, he choked. He gave you 60%.
My voice was steady.
I didn't ask for any of it. But I will protect it. From you.
He stood.
You can't just walk in here and... I'm not walking in, I said calmly. I'm taking my place. He stared at me, his daughter, the one he'd spat on, now standing in the very room he used to run the world. You'll ruin everything, he said. You don't know business. I leaned forward. And you didn't know your daughter. We're even. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. But I'd always been this person. He just never bothered to see. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. By the way, I reinstated the community outreach program you canceled last year.
People relied on that.
It's already funded. His mouth opened. I cut him off. It's not about revenge, Dad. It's about healing what you broke. He had no words. That night, I stood alone in the Willow Ridge Estate's garden, barefoot in the grass I used to run across as a child. The wind was cool. The moonlight spilled across the wild roses. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own family story. I was rewriting it, not with fire, but with truth and kindness. A week passed, and just when I thought the storm had finally begun to settle, Ivy came knocking, this time not smirking, not sneering, but pale and silent on the front step of the Willow Ridge estate. Dressed to perfection, as always, but her hands trembled slightly, betraying the nerves she was trying hard to hide. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't respond at first. Just moved aside and let her in. She stepped into the foyer, eyes flicking to the walls like she was walking through a stranger's house, though this used to be her playground, her palace. She'd once called me a failure right at the foot of that staircase, the same one she now wouldn't look in the eye. "I thought you'd be cruel," she said softly. I closed the door behind us.
Why?
Because that's what I would have been. I led her into the sitting room. We sat on opposite couches, like opponents in a match that had no official start. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "Then why are you here, Ivy?" She exhaled sharply. "Because you're about to find something." And I'd rather you hear it from me than from anyone else. Her voice cracked. That caught me off guard. Ivy never cracked. I took things, she whispered.
Money.
From the company. Before Grandpa bought the shares back. I was helping Daniel, my fiancé, cover some debts. He promised to pay them back. I thought it would be a one-time thing. I didn't say a word. Just let her talk. But it snowballed. And when Dad started panicking about missing funds, I let him think it was one of the junior partners. I let someone else take the fall. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They fired him. He had kids. My stomach clenched. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. She looked straight at me for the first time. Because I know what you're capable of now. You could destroy me. I blinked slowly. I'm not like you, Ivy. I know, she said. That's the problem. You were never like us. And we hated you for it. There was a long, heavy pause. Then I said, you should come clean. She scoffed bitterly. I already did. To you. No, I said.
To them.
The board. The man you let take the fall. To Dad. Her face twisted. He'll disown me. Then you'll finally understand. She flinched.
Hard.
But I didn't soften it. Truth doesn't come cushioned. I'm not asking you to burn yourself down, I added. I'm asking you to stop hiding behind other people's ashes. Her hands were clenched now, knuckles white. Do you want me to go to prison? No, I said honestly. I want you to fix what you broke. 2 days later, Ivy did the unthinkable. She stood in front of the boardroom, before the very people who once praised her as the golden daughter of the Alden name, and she told the truth. About the embezzlement. The lies. The man she scapegoated. The room was frozen. You could hear the scrape of a pen against paper, like thunder. She didn't cry. But when she looked at me afterward, there were tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not just for what I did. For how we treated you all these years. I nodded. Sorry only matters when it leads to change. I want to try. You'll need time, I said. But time's not the enemy. Silence is. That weekend, I visited the man she had wronged, Marcelo Ruiz, the former junior partner who lost everything in the scandal. He answered the door with suspicion in his eyes, until he saw me standing there with Ivy beside me. I don't expect you to forgive me, Ivy said. But I'm here to take responsibility. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, you're the first Alden to ever apologize. Ivy's breath hitched. I lost a year of my life because of what you did, he said, voice calm but heavy.
But
I've watched your sister. How she turned the company around. And I believe in second chances now. He stepped aside. Let us in. That night, we talked for hours. About justice. About pain. About what it really means to rebuild a life. Weeks later, Ivy started working at the company again, not in an office, but in the community program I restarted. She delivered groceries, packed care boxes, sat with homeless teens and listened. She didn't ask for a camera. She didn't want praise. And slowly, she began to change. One night, while locking up the office late, I found a note taped to my door. It was from my father. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I need to see you. Just once.
please.
I have something to give you. Part of me wanted to rip the note in half. But another part, the part that had learned strength could also mean grace, told me to go. The next morning, I drove to his small apartment in the city. It was nothing like the estate. Modest. Quiet.
Clean.
He looked older.
Smaller.
He handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph.
Me.
Age 6. Holding a paintbrush. My face lit up with joy. My father standing behind me, smiling. It was the last time I was proud, he said. Of me? I asked. Of myself.
I didn't say anything.
I let fear turn me into someone cruel, he whispered. I saw your courage, and instead of learning from it, I tried to kill it. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I looked at the photo again. The edges had been mended with tape.
He looked at me.
Can we start over? I thought of everything he'd done. The years of silence. The humiliation. The pain. And still I nodded. On one condition, I said. Anything. You never call me a shame again. His throat worked hard to swallow. Never again. A month later, the Alden estate was no longer just a monument to money and pride. It had become a symbol of quiet redemption. The community garden was thriving where a tennis court used to be. The East Wing, once reserved for private wine tastings, had been converted into an outreach center. Paintings hung on the walls, mine, some donated by local artists, and they weren't just decor. They told stories of loss, resilience, and finding your way home even after you've been turned away. But there was still one final gathering to face. Grandpa Elias had passed peacefully in his sleep just a few days before. The man who saved my soul in front of the very people who once watched it burn was gone. We held his memorial on a Sunday. Rain threatened the skies but never came. The estate was full of people I hadn't seen in years, people who'd once scoffed at my name but now shook my hand with respect in their eyes. I stood in front of them, not as the outcast, but as the woman Grandpa knew I could become. I looked across the yard and found my father seated quietly near the front. He looked at me differently now. Not like a daughter he wished he didn't have, but like one he finally saw. My mother stood beside him. For the first time, she wasn't distant. Her hand was on his. And Ivy? She was behind the refreshment table, passing out lemonade, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, smiling at a child who dropped his cup and helping him pick it up without a single sigh. When it was my turn to speak, I held the mic with both hands. My grandfather once told me that blood doesn't make a family strong. Truth does. And kindness. And the courage to stand back up when the world's on fire. I looked at the crowd. I was told I brought shame to this family. But the truth is, what brings shame isn't falling down. It's refusing to get back up. What brings shame isn't failure. It's choosing cruelty over compassion. Silence over justice. Pride over love. A quiet hush fell. I'm not here because I want revenge, I continued. I'm here because someone believed I deserved more. And, because of him, I learned to believe it too. My eyes landed on the old wooden box, now placed beneath a tree, sealed with a plaque. To the one who remembered. To the one who never forgot. To Elias Alden, who passed the torch to the brave. I smiled. My throat burned with emotion. But I'm not the only one he saved, I added. He saved all of us, by giving us one last chance to choose better. That evening, as the crowd thinned and twilight painted the sky, my father walked over. Ivy was beside him. And for the first time in my life, I felt like we were finally standing on even ground. He held out his hand. I'm proud of you, Camila, he said. No hesitation. No shame. I took it, then turned to Ivy. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes were softer now.
Real.
I applied for an artist grant in your name, she whispered. Local kids with no art supplies. They'll get everything they need. My chest tightened. I reached out and hugged her. As the stars emerged and the garden lights flickered on, I walked alone to the swing set Grandpa had built me when I was 7. I sat down, the wooden seat creaking beneath me, and looked at the estate, my estate now. Not as a trophy, but as a place rebuilt with love. I had been thrown out, spat on, erased. But I came back, not with fire, not with vengeance, but with truth, kindness, and unshakable strength. And they would never forget that again.